Darnell Joseph Whitmore had spent 11 weeks updating his resume, pressing his shirts, and telling himself that something was going to break his way soon, because the alternative to believing that was a darkness he could not afford to sit inside of for very long. He was 34 years old and he lived in a one-bedroom apartment on the third floor of a building on Peachtree Hills Avenue in Atlanta, Georgia, a city that had always felt to him like a place built for people on their way up, which made the experience of standing still inside it, or worse, sliding backward, feel particularly disorienting, like running the wrong direction on a moving walkway while everyone around you glided forward effortlessly. He had been a senior logistics coordinator at a mid-size supply chain firm called Barroway & Greer until the restructuring in August, which was the corporate word for the process by which 23 people lost their jobs in a single afternoon and were handed cardboard boxes and escorted to the elevator by HR representatives who could not quite meet their eyes. Darnell had packed his things without making a scene. He had said goodbye to the colleagues he respected. He had taken the elevator down to the lobby and walked out onto Peachtree Street into the August heat and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, feeling the particular surreal quality of a Thursday afternoon that had no shape to it anymore, no next meeting, no inbox demanding his attention, nothing pulling him forward into the next hour of his life. And then he had walked to his car and driven home and sat in his parking space for a while before going upstairs because he was not yet ready to be inside the apartment in the middle of a workday. 11 weeks later, on a Tuesday in late October, Darnell put on the suit he had bought 3 years ago for his cousin Raymond's wedding, a charcoal gray two-piece from a department store on Cobb Parkway that he had dry cleaned twice since August in anticipation of exactly this kind of moment, and he drove downtown to the offices of Meridian Supply Solutions, a logistics and distribution company based out of a 15-story building on West Peachtree Street whose name he had first seen in a job posting that a former colleague had forwarded him 6 weeks ago with a short message that said simply, "This one's you, apply." He had applied the same day. He had done 2 phone screens and 1 video interview and had been told after each one that the hiring team was very impressed and that they would be in touch, which was language he had learned to distrust from experience but which had, in this case, apparently meant something. Because here he was walking through the revolving door of a 15-story building on West Peachtree Street with his resume printed on good paper and his shoes polished and his heart beating in the particular way it does when something feels like it might finally be it. The lobby was marble and glass and planted with the kind of large-leaf tropical plants that corporate lobbies use to signal prosperity without warmth. He rode the elevator to the 12th floor, where the Meridian offices occupied the entire level, and he walked to the reception desk and gave his name and the time of his appointment and watched the receptionist, a woman in her 30s named, according to the small nameplate on her desk, Courtney, look him up and down with an expression that offered nothing, not hostility exactly, but a particular brand of professional vacancy that communicated clearly that she had assessed him and found him unremarkable, and she said, without warmth, that the hiring team was running behind, and that he should have a seat, gesturing toward a row of chairs along the wall without looking up from her monitor again. Darnell sat down. He folded his hands in his lap. He checked his phone once, then put it away, because he believed that sitting in a waiting room with your face in your phone was a way of telling the room that you were somewhere else, and he wanted to be here, fully, because this mattered. The waiting room had 3 other chairs occupied when he arrived, a young woman in a blue blazer reviewing notes on a tablet, a man in his 40s with the polished, practiced ease of someone who interviewed regularly and found it unremarkable, and, in the far corner near the window that looked out over West Peachtree Street and the Midtown skyline, a man who occupied his chair the way certain men occupy rooms, with an expansive, settled authority that suggested he had long ago stopped needing to prove anything to anyone, which, Darnell had learned over the years, was a quality that manifested most visibly in men who had accumulated enough money that the performance of importance had become unnecessary. This man was wearing a suit that cost more than Darnell's rent, and he was speaking quietly into his phone with the unhurried confidence of someone who had never once worried about whether a phone call was going on too long. His name was Terrence Hollis, and he was the senior partner at a consulting firm called Hollis & Brain that was there to pitch Meridian's executive team on a contract worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000, which was the kind of number that made men like Terrence Hollis comfortable in rooms where other people were nervous. Over the next 40 minutes, Darnell watched as every person who had arrived after him was called through the glass door into the interior offices ahead of him, the woman with the tablet. Then the man with the practiced ease, then two other candidates who had arrived 15 and 20 minutes after Darnell's scheduled appointment time. He said nothing. He adjusted his position once. He looked at his watch once. He breathed, slow and steady, the way his grandmother Loretta had taught him to breathe when things felt like they were tilting out from under him, in through the nose, out through the mouth, and remember that the moment you are in right now is not the whole story. At the 93-minute mark, Courtney looked up from her monitor for the first time since he had arrived and called his name in the flat, administrative tone of someone reading from a list rather than addressing a human being, and when Darnell looked up and met her eyes, she said that the hiring team had reviewed their options and decided to move forward with another direction, and that he was free to go. She said it the way you say it when the decision has already been made and the conversation is already over and the only remaining task is the logistical one of clearing the waiting room. No explanation. No eye contact after the first second. No acknowledgement of the fact that he had been sitting in that chair for an hour and 33 minutes with good paper in his hands and his shoes polished and something genuine at stake. Darnell sat with that for one full breath. Then he stood up, slowly and with the unhurried dignity of a man who had decided somewhere along the way that how you carry yourself in the difficult moments is the truest measure of who you are, and he straightened his jacket, that charcoal gray suit from the department store on Cobb Parkway, and he picked up his leather portfolio and he turned to walk to the elevator. Terrence Hollis, in his corner chair, leaned slightly toward the colleague who had accompanied him, a younger man named Brett who functioned as something between an associate and an audience, and said, quietly but not quietly enough, that you could always tell, couldn't you, and that the suit said everything, and Brett made the small sound of someone who is not sure whether to agree but knows he is expected to, and did. Darnell heard it. He heard every word of it. He kept walking. There was a man near the elevator, a maintenance worker named Eugene Prentice, 61 years old, who had been with the building's facilities team for 14 years and who was working his way down the 12th floor hallway with a mop and a rolling yellow bucket, moving with the careful, methodical pace of someone who has learned over a long career that the work done quietly and without recognition is still work that matters, still work that holds everything else up. He had been in the hallway when Darnell arrived. He had been in the hallway the entire time, moving in and out of the waiting room's peripheral awareness the way maintenance workers often are, present, necessary, and functionally invisible to most of the people around them. Darnell stopped at the elevator and pressed the button and then turned to Eugene, who had paused his mopping nearby, and said, with genuine warmth and no performance in it whatsoever, that he hoped Eugene had a good rest of his day. Not as a throwaway pleasantry. As a real thing, offered from one person to another because Darnell was the kind of man who had been raised to see people, in all positions, at all levels, and to treat the seeing of them as something worth expressing out loud. Eugene Prentice stopped mopping. He looked at Darnell for a moment with the slow, clear-eyed attention of a man who has spent 61 years learning the difference between the people who look past him and the people who look at him, and he said, without hurrying, that he appreciated that, and that Darnell should take good care of himself, and then he added, almost to himself, but loud enough, that right there was what real class looked like, and he meant it in the specific and serious way that older men mean things. When they are not paying a compliment so much as making an observation about the nature of a person's character. The elevator doors opened. And a man stepped out of them moving at the particular velocity of someone who has been trying to get somewhere for 2 hours and is acutely aware of every minute that has been lost. He was in his mid-40s, with the kind of face that had been shaped by a lot of decisions made under pressure, not hard, exactly, but direct, and fully present in a way that Darnell registered immediately. He was carrying a phone in one hand and a laptop bag in the other, and he was still slightly out of breath from what appeared to be a sprint from the parking structure. His name was Raymond Cho, and he was the CEO of Meridian Supply Solutions, and he had been in traffic on I-75 for 2 hours and 17 minutes due to an accident near the Brookwood interchange that had dissolved his Tuesday into something unrecognizable, and he had been on the phone with his assistant and with the hiring team the entire time trying to manage a situation that had clearly not been managed in his absence in the way he had intended. He stepped off the elevator and took in the waiting room in a single sweeping look, the empty chairs, Darnell standing with his portfolio and his polished shoes clearly in the process of leaving. Terence Hollis settled in his corner with his expensive suit and his comfortable authority, and Courtney at the reception desk with the expression of someone who believes they have handled things correctly. Raymond Cho looked at Courtney and asked, with a precision that was quiet and therefore more serious than loudness would have been, whether the 11 o'clock candidate, Darnell Joseph Whitmore, whose resume Raymond had read twice and flagged specifically because it was the strongest in the pool, had been dismissed without the interview taking place. Courtney said that the team had decided to move forward in another direction. Raymond was quiet for a moment. Then he stepped around the reception desk and walked directly to where Darnell was standing at the elevator, and he extended his hand, and he introduced himself by his full name and his title, and he said clearly and without ambiguity that the interview had not happened yet, that it was happening now, and that Mr. Whitmore should please come back inside. Then Raymond Cho turned and looked at Terence Hollis in the corner chair, at the expensive suit, the associate named Brett, the settled and comfortable authority of a man who had just made a quiet comment about another man's clothing, and he asked, in the same measured tone he had used with everyone else, which firm Terence was representing today. Terence straightened in his chair with the reflex of a man accustomed to being recognized and told him, with the practiced confidence of someone who has said his firm's name in rooms like this many times and watched it land like a credential. Raymond nodded once, slowly, and then said that Meridian would be going in another direction with that particular engagement, and that Terence was welcome to go. He said it with the same language Courtney had used with Darnell, which was not an accident, and everyone in the room understood that it was not an accident, and Terence Hollis picked up his briefcase and left without the comment he would have made in different circumstances, Brett trailing behind him in a silence that said everything. Darnell Joseph Whitmore walked back through the glass door. The interview lasted 45 minutes. He was offered the position before he reached the elevator to go home, and he stood in the Meridian lobby on the 12th floor of a building on West Peachtree Street in Atlanta and called his grandmother Loretta and told her, and she was quiet for a moment on the other end of the line before she said that she was not surprised, not one bit, because she had known since he was 7 years old who he was, and who he was had always been going to be enough. The way you treat people when you have nothing to gain from treating them well, the maintenance worker in the hallway, the stranger at the elevator, the person the room has decided doesn't matter, that is the clearest possible picture of your actual character, not the one you perform for people you are trying to impress. Dignity is not something you hold and reserve for the moments when someone important is watching. It is something you either live all the way through or you don't live at all. The rooms that matter most have a way of noticing the people who understand this. If this story moved you, please share it with someone in your life who needs to be reminded that how you treat people on your hardest days is the most honest thing about you, and that the world has a long memory for kindness offered freely, with nothing asked in return.